Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call the meeting of the Rural Concerns Advisory Committee to order at 4:01 today. And thanks for being here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 committee members in person. We have 3 online, and we've got a couple more who indicated they'll be coming, but they may be waiting on parking or something. So thanks for being here. Do you want to do anything else on, and we do have enough people in person to have a quorum here in person. Would remind the 3 members that are online. If you're online, if we have any votes, you can't vote. Mr. Salvo, that means you can continue to vote again today. Do you want to say anything else, Ken, in terms of attendance?
I'll put the attendance report. So here's the current report. So no one is in jeopardy for attendance. Everyone's in good standing. If anyone has any questions, they can always ask us.
Okay, I think the other thing that might be worthwhile, I was going to say before you put that down.
Oh,
Sure. You want to pull it back up just real quickly? Might be good because I think people lose track of time. Typically, we have people rolling off and on the committee. It might be good to let the folks know who will be rolling off in 2022 unless they reapply. So, do you want to do that, Ken? Or
well, we can see it. This particular list, it shows it in this column here. So
right. So Gene Chance's term ends on 9/30. My term ends on 9/30. Krista Cubulus's term ends on 9/30. James Longnecker's term ends on 9/30.
Yeah.
So those are the folks, and we'll go ahead and tell you now. And I think when it comes time, if they want to continue on, they'll still have to reapply, and then the board will choose who the folks are.
Right.
So those of you who have terms expiring in 22, you may want to think about that if you want to keep continuing on the committee. And if you do, you'll have to do the application again, and then the board will select. And there's no guarantee just because you've been on the committee that you will necessarily continue on the committee.
And we'd start advertising these positions over the summer, so a few months from now, typically 90 days or so from the September 30th expiration, we would advertise these positions.
Right, and that'll be here before you know it because it's already March. So anyway, I just thought it would be useful while that was up that we did that. I'll just keep the chair's comments real short. I'll be interested. We've had a chance to talk to a few people when they come in. But one of the things we'll want to do is we're going to try to meet down here once quarterly during the year. We're only planning on 10 meetings. Typically, we haven't met in December unless we really need to. And we've tended to take June, July, August, one of those months off. And then we have 1 degree of freedom if we want to have 1 more meeting off. We won't cancel meetings if we've got something that we need to do or topics important to talk about, but you want to do that. So anyway, I would say that would be my comments. Feedback here, anything you just observed today. We'll do more next week. Can I just ask those who are present, how many of you use the garage and the parking pass? Okay. So we're not going to get any feedback on the parking pass. That's what I was wondering about. You must all be like me. I set up helped my wife set up a new computer this week, and I've been dealing with other apps. And I was leaning that way anyway. I said no more apps.
Yes,
I'm just done with apps for right now. So that's that. So in the material was sent out to us earlier. Regina sent out the minutes from the 2/15/2022 meeting.
You want to approve the agenda?
Pardon?
Approve the agenda.
Oh, yes, excuse me. Forgot to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for today?
I move
Jean
approve
Chance moved.
agenda for today, March 15th.
Second.
Seconded by Larry Hall. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That motion carries unanimously. Now we'll go to the minutes. Has people had a chance to look over those? They see any additions or corrections they want to add? Remember, the two presenters were Mr. Crosby and Mr. Sexton at that meeting.
Move the minutes of the February 15th meeting be approved as submitted.
Okay, moved by Mr. Hall.
Second.
Seconded by Jean Chance. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Okay, that also passes unanimously. So we have one item of new business today, and we are sort of planning our meeting this year, going back where we had a discussion.
Mr. Chair, I see that there is one public person online, Sarah Daniel.
Hello. Where do you see it? Hello, Sarah. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Sarah Damian, and you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is not the normal Zoom that I'm used to. My name is Sarah Damian. I'm just identifying as a concerned citizen. I'm going to be moving to that area and going to be working in the field. And I just kind of wanted to see what was going on with the meeting today.
Okay, well, welcome to the meeting. And at the appropriate time, we'll allow comments from the public as well as committee members. If there anything needs to be said or that you want to say, and welcome to the meeting.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for calling that to my attention. That wasn't showing up on my screen for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. Yeah. So we're going back and we're picking up on some topics that came up. So one of the issues that came up, and Ms. Werner, I believe, was one who raised the issue. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but it related to use value assessment of agricultural property. It also related to agritourism and agri areas and valuation and stuff like that. And we had a detailed discussion. I used to work some in that area. I know Department of Revenue used to do trainings for people who were doing agricultural assessment. They sort of gave guidelines, but property appraisers could sort of adjust those on local needs and stuff like that. Also, I'm well aware of on the ag use investment statute 193-461, all the court cases that have been brought by that. And actually, for those of you who haven't been around Alachua County for a while or followed that Ed Crapo was the property appraiser in 1986 in the State Property Appraisers Association, as well as Alachua County. Took a pretty hard legal approach on this and did not come out on the prevailing side the way my memory is on that. And it was due to the previous court rulings, as these cases have been tried in different places in Florida. So what we decided to do is ask someone in from the property appraiser's office, and we have on the line with us today Toby Foster, who's the director of valuation for the property appraiser's office, and Mr. Bill Harlan, who is an attorney and offers legal advice in this areas. We'd like to say welcome to both of you. And Ryder, if you can hear us, welcome as well. And hopefully we'll have some questions for the group. But Mr. Foster, we'll let it turn it over. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and you can talk to us about valuation, specifically of ag property and agritourism, and some on how it comes about, and then we'll take questions when it's appropriate.
Okay, and actually the beginning of my presentation is going to be brief. I'm mainly here to answer whatever questions you guys have, but as you stated, Florida Statute 193-4.461 basically administers the agricultural classification, also known commonly as the Greenbelt Law or Greenbelt Rule. Basically what that does is that allows the property appraiser's office to value the property in its current use as opposed to its highest and best use. For tax purposes, that is. The office still maintains a true market value, what we believe the property would be sold for on the open market, but your taxes would be based upon an assessed value, which would be in its current use. Meaning if the property is basically a hay field and it's producing hay, we assess that based upon its value producing hay, not what it could be worth to a developer who might come in and put 20 homes on the property. So what we do, we actually get stats and different statistics, different rates, things like that from the Department of Revenue. They base it off of a 5-year rolling income, those types of properties. That's what we utilize for the agricultural properties. As far as what, I'm not sure if you want me to go into what qualifies as an agricultural classification, or if you guys already, I would assume you guys are probably knowledgeable about that already.
Well, I think so, but I think the thing, and I don't know if Mr. Harlan wants to add anything. Well, so obviously, when I was active on the UF faculty, testified to the legislature many times. There was actually a House Tax Advisory Committee back in the 1980s that John Dent headed from down in Sarasota. I testified to them. And obviously there were lots of court cases that were also influencing. So anything influential in courts, but yeah, go ahead and do a quick explanation if you'd like to. And besides just the agricultural land itself that's used in production, anything you can add on to how that law has been expanded. I don't know. I want to say that law was adopted in Florida in '59 or something like that. I don't know the use value assessment law. Florida was about the second or third state in the country to adopt it, but there's been a lot of additions over the last 50 years or so of that.
Okay, well, I'll say, first of all, I'm not an attorney. I am the director of valuation. So, I mean, I can speak to the policies that we have, how we do our valuations, the procedures that we use currently and have used over the last, say, 10 years that I've been with the office.
Then maybe we can get Mr. Harlan, if he's got any legal, cases that stand out in his mind, has had Lewis on the administration of that law later.
Toby's involvement in this and on the valuation side is much longer and longer lived than my evaluation in this office. So I've been here about 3 years, and we've actually rarely dealt with challenges to the classification. We really looked at, I think he and I both really looked at this presentation as more about the newer phenomenon of agritourism and how that relates to your ag classification, how the two relate to each other. You're right about 1959. That was the original law based on the research I did. I think, you have to keep in mind the term bona fide agricultural operation. So I think the point is ag tourism activity is not supposed to take away from that bona fide agricultural operation as qualifying for the ag classification, nor does it really add much to it, because an underlying principle of a bona fide ag tourism endeavor is it's occurring on a bona fide agricultural operation that qualifies it for the ag classification in the first place. And so the two do have some work together, but the reason agritourism has its own law, I believe, is so that property appraisers don't say, you're not really a bona fide farm operation, you are a tourist business. And that, would tend to weaken the claim for agricultural classification. But the law protects the bona fide farm operator from losing that classification, because there's also an ag tourism operation on that same land. We also run in a lot to people that want to apply a lower classification, a lower tax rate to the structures involved in the ag tourism. I suppose, early on they wanted to reduce the assessed value of their improvements on the farm. And it's really a classification for the land rather than for the improved property on the land. So ag tourism is not going to defeat that classification, but the structures involved in the tourism endeavor will be assessed at fair value, market value. I'm thankful that Toby's nodding his head to that. So go ahead and explain a little more if you've got something.
Okay, so actually everything that Bill said was absolutely accurate. Property appraiser's office, the property appraiser's office has to classify properties whether they are ag or non-ag land. If they are classified as agricultural land and a timely application is made by the property owner, and they meet the criteria of being a bona fide commercial agricultural operation, then the property appraiser's office should grant that classification. There are a number of factors that are taken into consideration when we actually determine whether or not it is a bona fide commercial operation. In fact, statute actually lists a number of them. The length of time that the property is being so used, whether it has been continuous, the purchase price paid, the size as it relates to the specific agricultural use, whether an indicated effort has been made to care sufficiently for the land, whether it is under lease, and then other factors as they become applicable. So what we do is when a property owner comes in and applies for the ag classification, what we would do is we would request a farm plan to ascertain what they're actually going to do. We would do a site visit to verify that they are actually doing what they're claiming to do. And if everything appears to be accurate, we would then go ahead and grant that classification. And I see James has their hand up.
Yes, James, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Are all of those qualifications listed on the statute? Because I've tried to look for, there are certain quotas for particular crops, but I especially see issues when there's not a monoculture-based crop. And so I'm wondering, I guess, what kind of flex the property appraiser has in that scenario, especially since a lot of agritourism has diversified farm systems.
Yeah, unfortunately, they do not have specific numbers that you need to have X amount of trees planted per acre or X amount of acres in watermelons or a number of cows per acre. And unfortunately, that is not in the statute. Now, there are some guidelines that the Department of Revenue puts out. That's one of the issues is there's a lot of gray area in here, and I think that's a big reason for at least back in the not so recent history, the different cases that were brought upon different property appraisers' office, including ours, is that there is a lot of gray in there. There's a lot of interpretation. I'd like to think that our office is I don't want to say lenient, but is very understanding. And if there certainly is an intent to have a bona fide commercial operation, then we will err on the side of caution. Frankly, you can't have a little chicken coop with 5 chickens in it and try to sell eggs on the side of the road and claim 10 acres. That's not realistic. Just like planting a tree farm on 1 acre of pine trees to be harvested. My thought is that you're not going to have any timber company come to harvest an acre of land. It's not reasonable. Those are the type of parameters that we would look at. Obviously there are certain types of agricultural that require significant amounts of land, and then there's others that do not. So, unfortunately, there are no real hard and fast rules. We do have to go and make judgment calls. We would like to use the guidelines by the state. We tend to do that. So
I have to say that going along with the discretion we're granted and that we make use of. There's a quite an interactive process between taxpayer, property owner, and this office, both informally as the decision about classification is being made. There's a built-in by DOR rule, a conference, informal conference that the property owner can take advantage of to arrange with the office to come in and talk. And then there's the value adjustment board that can make a ruling after a hearing, after evidence is exchanged concerning the disputed classification that the property owner thinks is deserved and we don't agree at that point. And then there's a circuit court lawsuit following that. So there's it's lengthy, it's several months. It usually goes into the next calendar year to finish all that, if not longer, before you could say that the classification decision is really final. And so we're willing to listen, and then later on in this process are forced to listen through the hearing and the court hearing case, if those are filed by the property owner, to whatever evidence or argument about the evidence that the property owner may have to claim, to base the claim of agricultural classification on. It's not a decision, a one-time decision. I mean, a instant decision without consideration, and then it's final and nothing can change it. There's quite a lengthy interactive process involved.
Mr. Harlan, why don't you explain for the people who want to know where the composition of and the responsibility of the value adjustment board?
The responsibility of what?
Value adjustment board.
Well, that's a special magistrate, not connected with this office at all, or with the property owner, who conducts a hearing, and that magistrate is actually picked by the clerk of court and conducts a hearing. Well, let me back up a little bit. The property owner files a petition with the clerk requesting such a hearing. And like I said, this is after informal interaction between the property owner and the individual appraiser, and then a little more formal, a guaranteed sit down with the office. Only after those two steps, if the property owner is not satisfied, then that's the time that the property owner can file a petition to the value adjustment board. The board is actually composed of taxing authorities, county commissioners, school board members. I think there's a member or two from the public, but the magistrate conducts the evidentiary hearing selected by the clerk. So there's notice, there's exchange of evidence, written evidence, photographs, diagrams, that sort of thing, between the property appraiser and the property owner. And then there's a recorded hearing in front of the magistrate. Both sides get to be heard, and then each gets to rebut the other side and sum it up. And then within 2 or 3 weeks, the magistrate issues a written report, which is the magistrate's recommendation to the full value adjustment board, composed of those elected officials and members of the public that I mentioned. And then again, and now you can go to court without going to the value adjustment board, but the value adjustment board is considerably cheaper, and most people will take advantage of that step, even if they think they have a case to take to court. They want to hear from the magistrate hired by the clerk rather than paid by the property owner. Get the magistrate's views on the claim of entitlement to the ag classification that we don't agree with. And then, much of the law that you referred to earlier that's made, those cases are state appellate cases following the circuit court hearing. So there's perhaps the beginning of another level of review by neutral, disinterested bodies on the dispute between the property owner and the property appraiser's office. So it's a lengthy process. It gets expensive at the end, I suppose, to hire lawyers to represent you, but initially it's informal, then it's a little more formal, and then it's, into the VAB and then to court. So there's a lot of steps that the property owner can take advantage of to pursue changing the property appraiser's mind about a denial of a classification.
And that's now, or that's the process now, or that will be the process with the change?
That would be the
That's the current
process.
process.
That's the current process, yes.
Yeah, and actually to go to add on to what Bill was saying, that actually the first step is when someone applies for a classification and it's denied, they actually get mailed a formal denial notifying them that they have been denied that classification and they will not be getting it.
And why? Isn't there some explanation in there, Toby?
Yeah,
Why?
no, yeah, it will explain that you're being denied this application or this classification, and these are the reason why. Whether we went out there and we were told it was being planted in pines and there was no evidence of that, or if if documentation wasn't provided that was required or deemed required by our office. So there's actual state law that requires that we do notify the people, and there are certain criteria that those denials have to have.
And of course, that denial, just like the classification itself, if it's granted, that's just a year. That the process starts over, not necessarily with a new application being required unless circumstances have changed, but a denial permits a new application in the following tax year for granting the classification. So, you might be fighting it in court, fighting the denial in court, and still be able to file again and bring us up to date or identify any new circumstances about the property or the use of the property that may not have been present or may not have been asserted the year before. So every year basically stands on its own.
So Cindy Sanders had a question.
So I'm Cindy Sanders, UF Office Extension here in Alachua County, and good to see you, Bill.
Good to see you, Cindy.
I just was gonna tell Toby that, once the farm plan requirement has come in effect, one of our agents, Dr. Tatiana Sanchez in our office, along with Farm Credit, does a series on entrepreneurship, and farm plan is a part of that because we have really gotten a demand for that now that the farm plan is required. And so we're doing that on our end to help mostly small producers that are coming in, to the county. And I'll just say that we work closely in the past with Ed Crapo's office on this. And anytime, if we want to sit down or anytime with our agents, because 9 times out of 10, they come to us first and they want to start an ag business, and we either tell them yay or nay, or you don't have enough land, or we send them to you. So, and we're usually on site as well. So we would be happy to work with you, but we are doing those farm plan series.
Okay, well, and we appreciate that. And actually, I think you and I and Tatiana had a discussion about this down at the Cade Museum a few months back. So, but we do appreciate that, and I'm sure the people who are getting those farm plans or the advice from you are certainly appreciated as well. So,
yeah, we tell them you're going to have that before you ever visit the tax appraiser's office. So you just be prepared. So that's what we're doing on our end. But yeah, we usually have the first visit with those new folks.
Miss, do you have a question?
I have so many questions. You would not believe it.
Let's start with one. Pick the most important one.
They're all important.
Case in point, 38 acres, supposedly a bona fide farm, not. Have now put up a wedding venue on the 38 acres, very close to one side of their property, which is very close to a deputy sheriff's new house that he had just bought. And as he told me, it got passed the day he signed on his house. And so he's stuck. But their whole intent was to have weddings and events there. on that property. That's all they ever intended to do. They have a couple of donkeys wandering around, and I think a cow. And that qualifies them as a farm, supposed according to the property appraiser's office or whoever.
Okay, well, I'm not familiar with the actual property, but I know we've actually had a number of, I say a number, we've had in the last couple of years, we've had a few of the agritourism wedding venues actually contest the denials of their actual classification, or at least the values. Part of that, I believe, is what precipitated Bill's comment about the structures. One of the cases we just finished up with was a wedding venue who thought that the actual commercial building where they actually held the wedding and did the catering and everything else should have no value and be covered under the classification, which obviously is not the case. But as far as this instance, this individual instance, we'd be more than happy to take a look at that. If you'd like, I can leave you guys with my email address. If you want to send me any information, a property owner's name or whatever, I'd be more than happy to take a look at that. Send one of our appraisers out there to verify that there is no actual bona fide use.
Well, I asked about that. They said they have 5 years to prove that they are producing donkeys and mini ponies. They got 5 years.
Okay. Well, we actually go and physically visit every 5 years as mandated by the state. But if I have a request that someone says they are not doing what they're saying they're doing out there, and there's evidence of it, and I understand that, what I need is the information of what the property is, and I'll be more than happy to make sure that actually we'll have Ryder actually physically go out there and take a look at that.
Okay, Mr. Hall.
As really tagging onto that question, my question is Larry Hall, Farm Credit of Florida. When you have a farm plan filed, is that a one-time filing or does it have to be filed annually? And the sub part of that question is, if you have a silviculture operation, again, do you file a management plan annually? Does the county require that?
No, we don't require it annually. Typically, it would be a one-time file. And as was alluded to in the last question, we physically visit every property, or we're mandated to do it once every 5 years. If we were to go out there on that 5th year, 4th year, whatever year we get out there, and we do not see what you had intended or what you had put on the farm plan happening, we may require, we will certainly contact you. We may require you to provide us with an updated one with whatever the new business plan is. Or we may just have a conversation, and if the answer from the property owner is sufficient, saying, hey, we were doing this, but now we had something happened and we had to stop for a year and we're starting again. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis, but we do not require a yearly resubmission of a farm plan.
How about the forestry management plan?
Same thing.
Same
thing.
idea.
We don't require it every year.
And that is required, the forestry management plan?
On new applications, the answer is yes. We are requesting that on new applications. The reality is, as much as we'd love to go back and request plans on all 5,000 or 10,000 ag properties that we have, it's not realistic right now. So as those properties change hands, or as we go out there and see they're not doing what they've claimed they were doing, we are requesting them at that point.
Mr. Baines, did you have a question?
Yeah, like concerning the classifications, I know like when you first started off, we was talking about, say for instance, when person farmland versus investor coming in saying that they want to purchase it for this price or whatever. Say for instance, they have 10 acres of say hay or whatever, and it's worth to them, they making $10 million off of it, and an investor want to buy 10 million. And I mean, because they still got to go through the zoning to get it zoned if they want to build any kind of commercial housing and all that kind of stuff on there. My thing is, if the person is making a living off of it, say that like right now, the times we going through where it is hard for work, it's hard probably to get animals or all those different factors that may play a part of it, and then they trying to subsidize, as she was saying, with a wedding venue or something in that nature to help, compensate to keep their farm alive. It seems like this process is pretty much only helping, it's only one side, it's not helping the farmer per se. It's more, say, putting more restrictions on the farmer and not, I think the way that it's set up cause for the city or the county to do more work, to go out, to do their due diligence. And now it's saying, well, we're going to cut down our due diligence and put more pressure on the farmer. That's what it seems to me. So is that the case?
I'm not sure I completely understand your question. Let me just ask this of you real quick. Are you asking, are we putting too much, are you suggesting we're putting too much onus on the property owners when they apply, requesting that they tell us what they're going to do, as opposed to when we go out there and look at the properties? Or
no, what I'm saying is that changing it will put more pressure on the owners, as far as just like I think like now with the setup, like she was saying with UL and with also farm credit, like it's already steps in place to kind of make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. And then on the county side, if they're going out evaluating every year, then it seems like things are already in place. That's what it seems like to me. And yet, during the course of the year, if you're having a hardship doing your business to try to keep up, you might be subsidizing with a wedding or with horseback riding lessons or something to kind of help offset to make until you're able to get it to the place that you need it to be. That's all I'm saying.
okay, well, and actually that's the ag classification. If you're raising hay, but you also happen to have a barn on there and you do a few weddings a year, the wedding venue itself does not disqualify the farm portion that is qualified for the ag. You still, if you're still raising hay, or you have animals grazing on the property and you're leasing it to somebody else who actually is letting their animals graze on it, and you happen to have a wedding venue, you have a barn that you've cleaned up, you've turned it into somewhere where they do the weddings, they bring in food, that the portion that they are doing with the barn itself is not covered by the ag classification, but the land that surrounds that is still providing an agricultural, a bona fide agricultural business is qualified. So the land will still be assessed at the lower rate. The building that you're utilizing to do something other than agriculture is not going to be. And actually, the buildings are not covered under the ag classification with a very few exceptions. One of which is for pump houses, pumps, wells, things like that. One is greenhouses to keep nursery stock from freezing, and another one is screened in areas to keep pests and different issues away from plants. But a barn, if you have a watermelon packing shed or a blueberry packing shed, those are not covered by the green belt or the ag classification. It is based upon the land that's being utilized to produce. So having a wedding venue on an existing farm that actually qualifies does not disqualify the farm at all. It doesn't have any negative impact on it at all. You still would have the classification. The only thing is that in the case of most of these wedding venues, when they go out and put a building on there that's worth $500,000, they're going to pay on the land based upon the ag classifications, but the taxes on that building are going to be based upon the market value, what it would be worth.
But they still will be getting taxed on that building.
They still are going to get taxed on the building. It's no different than if you have a 10-acre farm and you have your home on 1 acre of it and the other 9 acres is leased to a farmer who's grazing hay on it. The 9 acres of land that you lease to the farmer are going to be assessed under the ag classification. If you apply, you give us the plan, show us the lease that you're leased to the farmer, whatever information you provide to us, showing that that's really what is truly happening. That 9 acres is going to be covered under the ag classification. The home site and where you drive and park your cars and the swing set for the kids and those things that are in the yard, those are not covered by the ag classification. That's part of, that's actually in the statute, that is not covered.
And that's not new.
No, that has been existing, so.
Try to get in order, James Longenecker.
James Longenecker again with UF. I have a few questions. Do y'all know how long it takes to review and audit a farm plan for the first application? How long does that take the property appraiser's office to vet?
It depends on how involved it is. How
Well,
many acres.
and how
You have
many
an
we
average?
have. I mean, to actually look over a farm plan and say, yeah, this looks good, it doesn't take much time at all. The problem is when we've got 400 of them to look over, you know, as that information gets in, it gets backlogged, and you know that's why we have to a certain date before we can send those denials out. And the reality is they have to be in by March 1st. They can't be submitted prior to January 1st. They have to be in by March 1st of that year. And then we have, I want to say it's what is
July
it,
1st.
mid-July, or yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's July 1st.
Well, July 1st is when we submit the roll. I believe it's either July 1st or shortly thereafter that we have to send out the denials for the properties that have applied but are not being granted. So to look over a farm plan, like Bill said, if it's a very basic, you know, we're planting X amount of trees per acre and we're going to come and do a relief cut after 10 years and we're going to put in, you know, fire breaks and we're going to mow the entire thing throughout, you know, every other row every year, that, you know, whatever is in that farm plan, you know, if it's something that's small like that, it may take us 15 minutes and we're done with it. The problem is if it's the 100th one we got to look at, it may take us 2 months to even get to that one, you know, depending on
Absolutely.
how many we get. So
Yeah, I wonder if there's room for optimization of time intervals and like resubmission of farm plans. Just because I personally applied for my first tax exemption for agricultural use this year, and the number of smallholder farmers that I know who have either like gotten out of the business or have changed their farm plan like dramatically in the first 5 years of operation is probably like 90% of just like my anecdotal evidence. And so I just wonder if, like, obviously the annual application has to be an annual application, but I wonder if there's any sort of optimization where it's like a tapering of visits after 10 years of being audited every 5 years or visited every 5 years. Just an idea. That was just a thought. But I also have another question that's completely unrelated.
well, just real quick, just to address that, state statute requires that we physically visit every property once every 5 years, not just agricultural, every property.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
Okay,
so
I didn't know that.
that is not selected only towards agricultural properties. That is every single family home, business, you know,
Yeah.
every institution, you know, every property in the county.
Okay, yeah, so it's just a problem of work overload.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is it, 110,000 parcels or something like that?
Yeah, in the neighborhood of 110,000 parcels.
Right.
Yeah, so like, yeah.
22,000 a year?
Yeah.
One.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And then I have a question around, we've just had this urban agricultural ordinance, and I'm pretty familiar with the county laws and how agriculture is, I guess, licensed in the county. When it comes to city property appraisal and building, and even agricultural exemptions, I guess, I don't know if y'all know how many parcels are agriculturally exempt within the city. And then,
Yeah, I don't have that figure. I'm sure it's something that we could put together, but it's not something I have off the top of my head. How many fall
okay,
within the city?
are y'all encountering any obstacles or problems with the rise of urban agriculture in your valuation, or is there anything tricky about that?
No, because the rates that we utilize are suggested by the state, and those rates are going to be the same whether it's in the city of Gainesville. If it's I'll use, if it's pine trees. The pine trees, depending on the soil classification, is going to be the same whether it's in High Springs or the city of Gainesville or Micanopy. It's the same rate because it's based upon a 5-year rolling average. So
For the
I hope that
county
answers
or
your.
for the state?
What the state does is the state does their own study of each county, and then they'll give us our county and the surrounding areas, and those will be the recommendations that we would get, and then make our decision as to what rates exactly we're going to use.
Cool. That's so fascinating. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thanks for asking.
I would like to bounce back to the ag tourism law.
Yep.
The bona fide farm issue. That the income from the bona fide farm must exceed the income from the wedding venue or whatever. The agritourism.
I don't,
Yeah, I don't think, frankly, we don't have access to what those proceeds actually are. So we have no way of knowing whether they're generating more off of weddings or off of producing hay. The statute said that it needs to be primarily used for a bona fide commercial agricultural classification. And according to, and it's statute 570.85, the agricultural agritourism, said the intent of the legislature to promote agritourism is a way to support bona fide agricultural production by providing a secondary stream of revenue. So it's obviously in there that, you know, they're anticipating this it is going to increase the revenue of the property. That's what it basically says right there. So if the property is primarily, if the property is, you know, is 40 acres and it's mostly hay, and then they're doing a wedding venue off to the side, you know, the land that they're producing the hay on still is still classified as ag. The portion that the building is on, you know, the discussion might be is the footprint of where the building is on, is that considered ag or is that not considered ag? That would be the only clarification. The property doesn't have to be only used for ag in any way, shape, or form. It's the same, you know, that would fall into the same as a home that's got 1 acre and then 9 acres of ag. Obviously, the house is going to be worth significantly more than the 9 acres of ag, but they still qualify for the classification on that 9 acres.
and I believe the bill that's pending the governor's signature now strikes the word secondary from that definition, so that would indicate to me that there's even less worry about the relative size of the wedding venue revenue versus the farm revenue. That revenue might be a measure of, is this a bona fide farm operation? But it's not as easy, or it won't be if this bill is signed into law, it won't be as easy as comparing those two numbers and saying you're really a wedding venue surrounded by a farm rather than a farm that has a wedding venue on it. The whole idea of the statute Toby was just referring to is not supposed to let the agritourism operation defeat the otherwise bona fide agricultural classification of the land. And so if the farm that was always there before the wedding venue is still a bona fide farm, with all the ups and downs that, you know, might pertain to farming operation over the years. But if it's still a bona fide farm operation, the amount of revenue that the agritourism activity is generating shouldn't defeat that, shouldn't force us or induce us to take away the ag classification.
And who polices all that?
And
Who polices?
what?
Who polices or enforces that? Thank you.
Who enforces it? Well, we determine the classification, if that's what you mean by enforcing. And then it goes forward through that process of consultation and appeals that I referred to earlier.
So can I jump in? And I don't know if I'm clarifying or understanding Sandra's question correctly, but I think the bigger question she's asking, and I'll just use her example if I remember correctly, 38 acres, a couple cows or a couple donkeys and a cow. Okay. So it doesn't matter if it's secondary or primary. I think her question is that real bona fide agriculture?
No hay.
And
No.
They do not hay.
So, the question is, and I think the question is, who's policing the bona fide agriculture in terms of that? And I know at the beginning, Mr. Foster, you said that, and lenient isn't the correct word, but you were being, trying to be fair, and, you're looking at the progress over a 5-year period and stuff like that. But you also said at the beginning that you don't have anything in terms of animal units. So timber, let's use timber as an example. If you got timber and you're growing pine trees and you're fertilizing, and you got a good farm plan, you're going to cut pine trees every 15 to 20 years. Am I right? Okay. What if they're not doing that, or they're cutting at 1/3 of it? Because I think some people have a feeling, and I'm not weighing in on this, but I think some people have a feeling that it's sort of an abuse of the bona fide agriculture if you're not meeting sort of somewhat minimum standards, or if it's a livestock operation, you're not going to have 10 head of cattle grazing on unimproved pasture, right, Cindy?
Right.
But you better have, if you got 10 head, you better have 30 acres of improved pasture for them to graze on. So I mean, who's mixing this all together if you're not putting some floor on the operation, I guess?
Okay, so to answer that question, to answer the original question, our office is policing it. We, like I said, we are required once every 5 years to physically visit each property. As far as the individual property, I happen to agree with you. If you're telling me that there's 2 donkeys and a horse out on 20 acres or whatever the property is, and then there's a wedding venue on it, in my opinion, if that's what's physically happening there, that shouldn't qualify for the agricultural classification. I don't know what farm plan was put in when they did this, whether they claimed that they were doing hay, whether they claimed that it was being hayed by a farmer who has signed a lease with them to do that. I don't know the specifics of the situation. I don't disagree with any of those comments about that sometimes this is being it's being used as a tax shelter where people are trying to claim agriculture and really don't deserve it. We've seen a number of properties where they planted pine trees, basically filed all the correct paperwork. We see them, they planted them to the correct acreage, and in 5 years they come in and brush hog the whole thing and knock it all down. Unfortunately, when someone comes in and applies and they've met the standards to put those in, we frankly can't deny them that classification because of what they might do in 5 years or in 10 years. We obviously don't know what their intent will be in the long term. Now, as soon as we see that they've actually gone through and removed them, we will then going forward remove the classification. But as of January 1st, which is the lien date, there was a bona fide operation there in those cases. So I don't know if that completely answered your question. Obviously other taxpayers, when they let us know when they believe a property is not being utilized for a bona fide commercial operation, we will go and look at it. But unfortunately, if it's one that we're going to go inspect in 2 years and nobody lets us know ahead of time that it's not being utilized that way, then it's probably not going to get seen until 2 years.
So Larry Hall.
Kind of a follow-up to that. What I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong in the assumption, is that you, on your farm plan, you do not require the farm plan to show that the operation is profitable. It's simply an agricultural use.
It has to be made in good faith. Okay, that's the actual verbiage in the statute. So like I said, if your farm plan is that you've got 10 acres and you're going to plant it with 20 pine trees per acre, the answer is going to be no, that's not qualified. It's not a sufficient number of trees. We're going to go through the best management practices to try to determine what would be a typical like a planting schedule, how many, whether it's 7,000 or 8,000 per acre, whatnot. If you're, like you said, with cattle, 10 cows on 3 acres is not going to work. It just isn't, So, we will look under the best management practices. We'll look under, we'll look at the recommendations that the state provides and make our best judgment at that point.
So a follow-up I have is, so how many new applications, do you have any idea how many new applications you're getting for agriculture classification each year? And of those, what percentage might be denied initially by your office?
Okay, so Ryder just sent me a message here saying there are 365 applications for this year. Now, because those applications just came in 2 weeks ago, we have no idea how many of those are going to be granted and how many are going to be denied at this point. I would venture to say that typically maybe 80% of them are granted and are bona fide commercial operations. That number may get skewed from year to year, depending if one application or there's one farm that actually has 30 or 40 properties and none of them qualify. That's 30 or 40 denials that will go out at a time. So those numbers do fluctuate from year to year, but last year out of 392, 82 of them were denied. So that puts it probably at about 65, 70% were actually granted.
Okay, Larry Hall again.
To qualify for the agricultural use of the property, does the zoning or the underlying land use plan have to be agriculture, or can it be residential?
All right, so I guess that depends on who you ask. We've actually had special magistrates who have ruled against us and granted classifications on property where legally they could never harvest the timber that they had planted on there. So typically we only see, to the best of my knowledge, we only see the applications on actual properties that are zoned for agricultural use. So to answer that question, obviously it's a 1-by-1 view if it's in an area that's zoned for residential, but it allows for agricultural as well, such as an improved subdivision that's say 10 acres where they can actually have hay on 9 of those acres, then yeah, that would be able to classify as that.
Mr.
Well, I just wanted to say that I appreciate these gentlemen. It appears like they're attempting to bring some common sense to their decisions. Having been involved in agriculture most of my life, I can assure you there's going to be a lot of years where you will show zero profit. So profit is not a good indicator of it. I mean, you can lose a lot of money in agriculture quick if you don't watch out. So I would say that it's wise not to use profit as an indicator of whether it's an agricultural property or not. And also I appreciate that you all don't nitpick these plans, because if I've got timber and it's year 15, well, the bottom might fall out of the timber market at year 14 and stay out for several years. I may make a decision as a producer, I'm not going to cut my timber until the market comes back, and it may go against the plan I originally filed. So I'm glad that you all allow a little bit of common sense and don't nitpick these producers like me on this stuff. So thank you, gentlemen, for using some common sense.
Mr. South.
Hey, one thought. Do I have a question? I guess I heard your statement earlier about there's no quotas, and but just through this conversation, I heard about 4 or 5 different quotas. So I guess my question is almost twofold, right? Like there is clearly at least confusion out in the community. I hear all the time, I sell livestock and everybody comes buy goats from me. They always say, hey, I need 10 goats for 1 acre. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard that before. Or I need 1 cow for 3 acres. You hear that all the time. So even though you say there's no quota, there's obviously a standard somewhere out there that people are spreading. So one, do you have any idea where this information is coming from? It's just word of mouth. And then two, I know you are short staffed, but it seems that at some point, for the community's sake, the ag classification process or the rules seems like a black box. So there's got to be outreach at some point. I know you guys got your website. They used to give out those little trifolds that explain ag. But I'm wondering, is there any plan from your office or the counties per se to kind of do some outreach to explain to people what this entails and, hey, there's no quotas, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to submit, et cetera?
So yes, to answer your question, the first question, those recommended numbers, those actually, I believe most of those are put out by the state of Florida, the different counties. I do remember when 10 years ago when I started working in this county, we had the same, that was in part of our pamphlets, that trifold I think they were talking about, where we actually had, these are recommended. Obviously, you know, there are going to be some times where if it says you need X amount of animals per acre, if you're off by 1 or 2, either way, you know, I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world, because 2 years later, you may be over by 2. It's going to average out over time. So, you know, that's why we say that there is no hard fast number. If you happen to have in your case, if you happen to have a goat operation and you have a wave of parasites come through and you lose a number of goats, we're not going to remove your ag classification just because you fell on hard time, number of your goats just passed away or you lost them, you know, or we happen to come out there the day after you've taken you know 50 goats to sale and now you're 5 below your what you're supposed to have. So we're not going to like the previous person that had spoken up. We're not going to nitpick on that. You know, we're here to look. Are you providing a bona fide commercial agricultural operation? The answer to that case is yes, it is. You are providing that, and therefore, you know, if your numbers happen to be 2 shy this year or 5 shy out of 50 of them, we're not going to go and say, no, you didn't do it, we're yanking it, you got to reapply next year and your taxes just doubled. We're not going to do that. That's not how we operate. So the second question is community outreach. We actually have already started to do that. I was part of, and I can't remember the name of the event that was down at the Cade Museum. There were 4 of us from our office that did it out there. We actually went down there and spoke with a number of people who came and asked us about the ag classification. Obviously, we're talking today, trying to do some community outreach. You know, our office is available by any group that wants us to come and talk to them. We're more than happy to do that. We've been to the different youth fairs. You know, we've had different booths set up in different places. So, you know, if we'll be more than happy to come and speak and answer as many questions as we can. I'd much rather be talking to you guys than putting together a case to put in front of a special magistrate because someone didn't understand what they really needed to do, you know. So
Cindy,
I just wanted to respond to one just a little bit. Those recommendations come from IFAS recommendations. And so those are our recommendations on improved pastures. And years ago, that was the way the ag exemption was set up as well. And they followed our office recommendations on 10 head of goats per acre or 2 acres per horse or whatever our 1.5 acres per cow-calf unit. Those are our recommendations. And so that's probably where a lot of that comes from. And that's the way it used to be set up. I think the way they have it now is a lot more flexible.
Yeah, so Mr. Hall was asking me, and I know when I was working it, they didn't. So is the Department of Revenue still doing trainers? There's usually at least 1 or 2 people in every county that are sort of the lead on their ag assessments. And that's where they come out with all sort of the minimum or the guidelines on, you know, goats per acre, cattle per acre, trees per acre, stuff like that. Are they still doing that? Do they publish that information someplace? I know they didn't used to, and the reason is they did it by area of the state, but every property appraiser had such a degree of freedom, there was no bound by that. So could you sort of answer that question?
To answer the question, do they put out recommended guidelines? Yeah, there are recommended guidelines. I don't know that they update them every year. And I do believe it's on their website.
Is it DOR or agriculture?
DOR.
DOR.
DOR, that's who we take guidance from.
Yes, yeah. So DOR, I do believe, does put out numbers on their website. Like I said, I don't know, I can't speak to whether or not they change them every year, but to be frank, you know, those numbers, the number of animals you can raise on a certain number of acres really doesn't change from year to year. It more changes from property to property, and obviously with the condition of the animals and other things like that. So, you know, we use our best judgment. We try not to nitpick too much, but you know, but still try to follow the guidelines as well. So.
Okay, well, we thank you for your time. We don't want you to think that we are complaining or pestering, but there was a lot of misconfusion and misconceptions. It's a moving target, and the property appraisers are elected and go in and out, and staff change in and out, and it's different in South Florida than it is in North Florida. So it's a very complex issue, but we want to bring everyone up to speed. It seemed like to be an interest of the committee. I think you can see by all the questions you got today, it is the interest of the community. We're hearing it out in the rural areas too, on what some of those misconceptions are. So we want to thank the three of you for your time, Mr. Foster for your lead. And if we have any other further questions or anything, we'll get back, and thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome. And if you, yes, and if you'd like another session, I'd be more than happy to answer as many questions as I can.
Okay, Mr. Baines has last question.
Yeah, I got one last question. Is what bill number is this? Is what bill number is this? You said it's going to the House to be passed or something like that, the Congress?
Bill, I'm going to let you answer that one.
I didn't understand the question.
The question, bill that you mentioned out, that was secondary, was being eliminated from the bill.
It's House Bill 11, sorry, Senate. Oh, shoot. Let me just double check something here.
And I think James also has a question when Bill gets done.
Hold on, James. We'll let you be the last one, but it's got to be the last one.
Okay, sorry. Senate Bill 1186. Senate Bill 1186 proposes changes the change I mentioned to state statute 570.85. James has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah, last question. Just wondering if you could use to simplify some of the if it's a bona fide operation or not, to clarify that. Do y'all require Schedule Fs or any sort of tax documentation to make sure that they're that they're a legit business, or are they able to just use their personal, I don't know. I don't know if that's
that's the problem. A lot of the smaller farms don't file anything additional other than just their normal IRS taxes, especially if you're talking about we'll go back to the 10 acres, a house, and they plant pine trees. They're not going to see any income from that for 15, 20 years. You know, so there isn't going to be any, you're not going to see anything on that. So, you know, we do on certain operations, one of the criteria that you can provide is your TPP bill. If you have personal property, your farm equipment and things like that, to try to prove that it is a bona fide commercial operation. You know, those things will, you know, if you provide your TPP account along with the, you know, with the actual forms that you file with our office, that obviously is very beneficial and very helpful.
Yeah, okay. That's tangible property, right?
Right.
That tangible personal property, which would be the equipment used. So
used in the business.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
letting me ask that question.
Sure. And if anyone needs to ask any other questions, obviously Ken has my email address, and you're more than welcome to share that with everybody if they have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on. I just pulled up the DOR site. If you search hard enough, you might be able to find it, but it's not popping out right easy. In fact, the first thing it says, in 1982, it says these rules are out of date. So I don't know how many thousands of things you might have to search through to do that. And I know when I was working in it, that was something that the DOR did not publish. They don't want to publish it. So,
Pretty much up to the discretion of the local property appraiser.
yeah, it is, because they leave it to the discretion of them.
I
So-
would think that some of the things they could consider, instead of just income from properties, would be like you're saying that they plant pine trees, you're not gonna see that income on that for 15, 20 years.
Right.
However, there will be expenses that they will be incurring on having that cleaned down from the underbrush and all that sort of thing on a year-to-year basis. So they might be able to look at what the property owner is putting out to see that, yes, they are heading in that direction.
Yeah.
And it's
Well-
a real operation.
I can tell you, I worked in this area for 30 years. I testified in the legislature many times. You got people who say, let's use the USDA definition of a farm, $1,000 of revenue in a year. That's all it takes, okay? I've seen them try to do animal units, trees per acre. I mean, they've tried it. And what we don't have to, Mr. Harlan's new enough with the property appraiser's office, but there's a long, long, long history of Florida property appraisal law related to agricultural use value assessment. And the courts have been favorable, very favorable to the landowner. And a lot of times they said the number of animal units, the number of income, the number of expenses doesn't really make a difference. You know, actually there was and I don't know if it was, I believe it was a St. Johns County case. And it was referred to as if it looks like a pig and it smells like a pig, it's a pig and it's a farm. Because a guy on the island in the St. John River had a few head of livestock and he was getting use value assessment with a big fancy house.
Another thing just occurred to me, and I know I've been involved with this appraisal side, is if you've sold a conservation easement on your property, how is the residual fee assessed for ag use? Because you have limited use now, sell agriculture, but the conservation easement, so I'm assuming that's not going to affect your ag assessment in any way.
That it
Yeah,
doesn't.
your ag exempt, the assessment will stay the same. We were just on a property this morning with EPD that's looking at that, and that question came up, and no, your assessment, your ag stays the same, because this particular farm that's gonna perhaps go into an easement with Alachua County, they're gonna keep all their agriculture, so.
So that would not then change the ag use valuation by the local property appraiser,
No.
but it will affect your appraised value for marketing the property,
Correct. Yes.
because you've got less than the full fee.
Right.
Right, you
Yeah.
got less than fee simple
Yeah.
on it. And the other thing that he brought up is interesting that sometimes people forget relates to this fact is there's nothing in the law, and there's many states in the US that have rollback provisions and stuff like that saying you can't convert the land. But there's nothing in the law having someone coming in and buying a few hundred acres, maintaining it minimum for 5 years, getting that use value assessment, bulldozing it all down and putting up 100 houses instead. There's nothing in Florida. that
I think the
prohibits
Grahams were famous for that in
So,
Miami
Miami-Dade
Lakes.
County. They made their money, their riches, they moved north.
It's coming this way.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's a fascinating topic. And I'm glad we got to have a chance to have the discussion. I'm not sure there's much we can do about it, but maybe we're all better understand ourselves.
So you see why we don't have a lot of money to pave our roads in Alachua County.
So it is encouraging to me that they got 365 new applications. It's hard to believe. So anyway, that's it. So I want to move on with just a couple of quick things and want to be as efficient as possible, but we'll be here as long as necessary. And that is, so when Dr. Deidre, it's Deidre, right? Houghton was here on this initiative. We had some people on the committee because she's wanting to get out and see some of the small communities and especially interested in places that might be selling fresh fruits, vegetables, and different things like that on it. And she's embedded in the Office of Economic, whatever Sean's.
Yes, she is. I
What's the
can't
name
think
of
the
that
name
department? It's economic development. so-
I know I tried to contact
Sustainability.
her and I left messages. I never got any phone calls.
You
back.
left them with her?
Left a message. I called the office and left her a message, but never was able to get in contact.
So I was just wondering is if we still have that and sustainability, equity, economic and strategic development. She's embedded in that office where Sean's at. So I was just wondering if we could get the people who made those commitments, would it be okay? And Krista Cubulus, are you still on the line? Chris? Because I don't see Jordan on there. She's. Hello?
I think Chris is there. He's just unmuting, maybe.
Okay. Hey, Chris, can you hear us? It looks to you like you're trying to talk, but nothing's coming through. It looks like you're muted.
Hey, I don't know if you hear me or not.
Now we can.
The cows are pretty loud, muted, so they would not be a part of the meeting.
So,
But I heard you asking me something I didn't know.
yeah, so when Dr. Deidre Houchins was here and on this initiative, she's wanting to hopefully get around with some people and see some of the small communities and maybe places that are where people have the alternative to buy vegetables and produce and stuff like that for food. And I think it's sort of food insecurity related.
Just lost him.
Okay, we'll save that. But I'm wondering if we shouldn't channel those to her office by a letter with that these people are interested. Here's their phone number. Please contact them and let us know.
Contact the number that was up there.
Yeah, well, like, because she specifically brought up Archer, and I know Jordan and Chris are both out there. Mr. Baines, I think you said you'd be happy to show her. It seems to me like there's one other person who said,
She's already been to my farm in Archer. But
okay,
she's like a personal friend of my wife, so it's
okay,
like not related to this.
okay. Well, it was on the east side of town, so it may have been Mr. Lofton, Curtis Lofton. But somehow I think we need to get that back together. We need to get the names of the people and phone number and say, please contact them.
Yeah, I'll try to reach out to her.
And you know, we've got it all documented. We tried, and if she doesn't take advantage, she doesn't. Hey, Chris.
Hey, sorry, I had to go outside to get a better signal. I got cows mooing and dogs barking and everything else.
So we were just talking, when Dr. Deidre Houchins was here, she was hoping to see some small areas and where people buy foods and produce or farms that are doing stuff like that. And I know Mr. Baines did, and she expressed interest of maybe something out, seeing some stuff out the Archway. Juan just told us that she is friends with his wife and she's visited his farm. But I'm thinking that we probably should try to put a letter together. She asked about heirs property too. And I've contacted a lady who has that program up at Florida A&M, and her name's Dr. Sandra Thompson. And she's got 2 emails from me and haven't answered them yet. But I think we ought to get it documented in a letter that, you know, we're willing to still show you around the community. Here's our phone number, and we send it to her as the committee so that we show that we followed up on it. And I wondered, because she specifically said Archer, and she's seen a little, but you know, I just think it's good when people ask us to do stuff and we sort of say, hey, we might, that we show that we follow through. And I'm afraid it's getting lost in phone messages and stuff like that. And if we send a letter, I think it's harder. So what's everybody's feeling on that?
If she's got a 4-wheel drive and wants to look at some cows and hydroponic vegetables and, you know, my little old operation, I mean, she's welcome to come see my place. As long as she leaves the tax man back in Gainesville. But no, anybody's welcome to come.
So on your
They got
high,
about, I'd have to have 4-wheel drive to get down my road though, especially after that last rain.
God,
so on the hydroponics, do you sell those locally, Chris, or do you sell them to?
Well, sometimes we sell at the Hale Market and sometimes just to friends. It's seasonal though. I'm not down there we're down there maybe 8 weeks a year, or it's gotten more. I just sell directly to people.
Okay.
That one I've got so early on Saturday.
I'm interpreting her interest very broadly. I think she would be interested in this. And if you don't mind, and we could forward your name and Mr. Baines's, and we could say that Mr. Salva has told us that she's been out to his farm and stuff like that. And then maybe we can try to touch base with Mr. Lofton and see if he has any other places on the east side that you would like to show her.
well, Dr. Clouser.
Yeah.
There was a county effort to document and map the producers of like a food shed map of Alachua County. I don't know how much effort has been put into that, and I'd certainly be willing to, not that Deidre doesn't know about Southeast Gainesville, but the area around Rochelle and John Nix and all the people out there off of 234 in Windsor and Rochelle. But I wonder if we could certainly clue her into like our experiences of the area. I wonder if there's room for a broader collaboration too, so that she can kind of strategically visit places that might also, in addition to having growers, has capacity for distribution sites, like the Healthy Corner Store Initiative, that bright green building that used to be a bait shop and a U-Haul space on Hawthorne Road just shut down, something like maybe that could be a little healthy grocery store or convenience store. But yeah, I wonder if there's a way that we could look at producers plus retail facing logistics.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so site specific to various locations in the county because, and I always get confused, but one of the most successful fresh fruits and vegetables places that I've seen in the general area was the Brown operation over by
Orange Heights.
Yeah, Orange Heights.
Yeah.
And he had 40 acres there. It was picked fresh. He had a little stand alongside the road. There were tons of people that stopped by there. I stopped by there whenever I drove by. But it's sort of hard doing that. But I think it takes the people who sort of got the expertise of the certain areas where they live, where there might even be potential for that. So I wouldn't know on the north side of Gainesville, or I wouldn't know going out towards La Crosse or something.
Right. Well, wasn't the county going to do some sort of outreach so that the local experts could be the ones putting data into that?
So I'm not aware of that. Is anybody else?
So Sean McClendon's working on that, James.
Right.
With Carissa with the city of Gainesville. And
Right.
I'm not sure where they are on that. That might be good to get Sean back to give us an update on that.
Yeah, or just write a letter that addresses both Sean and Deidre. I don't know.
Okay. So before I go write any letters, I prefer it's a vote of the committee of what I'm supposed to write and stuff like that. So I need some motion before I just write something for the committee.
I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but can I move when can I make a motion when I'm on Zoom? Can I move?
Yeah, you just can't vote. I don't see.
Okay.
Putting a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion if I'm allowed to via Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay, I make a motion that we write a letter to Deidre and Sean and any other county relevant county staff, offering our expertise in local food systems, production, and logistics, to contribute to institutional knowledge of our county's food shed.
Okay, Regina, did you get that? So, or will it be on the recording?
It'll be on the recording.
Okay, we've got it on the recording, but basically it's send a motion to send a letter saying to Deidre and Sean that the committee would like to cooperate with them in locations, production for food distribution. I didn't get it exactly as you said it, James.
That's all right. Yeah, I said local food production. Oh goodness, production, distribution, and something else.
Location. Was it location your third point?
Well, that's definitely a component of it. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's exactly what I said. I don't.
Well, you were talking about facilities like in the local.
Yeah, yeah. So logistics and production are logistics, production, and retail sites, maybe.
Okay. Would it be okay with the maker of the motion if we say we're happy to hear that you've seen the Salva operation? We still have a couple of people on the committee that'd be happy to show you around and give them the names and number, that same letter. James, would that be?
Yeah, I think that the main point of the motion is that the letter that we write is towards not only Dr. Huchin, but also towards the county's institutional knowledge of the food shed, so that we don't. There has been so much redundancy in trying to like orient people to our agricultural practices in the county and practices and distribution and availability. And so I think that it would behoove us and be most valuable for us to try and enshrine that in some sort of countywide resource.
Is it like a blank letter or?
Is that
Like, and so that could be as simple as if we talk to Deidre and show her around that she's gonna like document it and put it somewhere. So that not only she can use it, but we don't have to give tours to every new person whose role has something that touches systems or agriculture.
Does everybody understand the motion? But because before we start discussing it, we need a second.
From what I'm hearing, I know she said she's saying the two individuals, but she also saying like a letter for anybody else. So how would we include? Will it be just like a dear sir, dear madam type letter, or is it addressing?
No, I think it'd be a
No,
letter,
county staff.
Dr. Houchins and Sean McClendon saying this is a follow-up from your meeting with us, and we'd like to cooperate with you and assist in documenting when possible food distribution, logistics, and facilities. I don't know what the correct wording would be exactly, as well as a follow-up on showing you different locations, and if we could put the names in there. So Mr. Baines, please contact Mr. Baines at this number. Please contact, we're glad that you went to Mr. Salva's farm, whatever the case might be.
They can come around with me any day.
Yeah.
Today
So
was my
before we
farm visit
discuss
day.
that, though, we need a second. So is there a second to the James's motion?
I'll second it. I just making sure that we have clarity of the letter.
Well, before we send it, I guess we ought to draft it and bring it back.
Yeah, I think that'd be.
So we'll go ahead and work on towards the draft. And then the only other thing I had before we get into members' comments or questions.
Just,
or-
can I just, before we leave that,
Oh.
so I think I get, that we can get some wording from the recording and draft something up. But is the committee wanting to list specific committee members' names and contact information in the letter?
Well, I think, that we should, when they did, Chris said that she could come see the hydroponics. He's selling at Hale. People in the community. Mr. Baines said he'd be willing. I want to say, that I can't remember if Mr. Lofton said he did or didn't. But I think if we could be specific, I think it'd be better for her. And if she decides not to follow up, that's okay. It's not because we didn't decide to follow up.
You want us to put all the committee members' names and contact numbers?
No,
That's-
just
okay.
when you were visited with us, these people volunteered, okay, whatever. And so all we're gonna vote on is that we come back with the draft letter of what James moved for our next meeting. Is that acceptable to you, James, before we send anything?
Yes.
Okay, so is it acceptable to the seconder, Mr. Baines? Is that acceptable to you? That we come back with a draft? Okay, it's acceptable both for them. Any other questions? Any other comments? If
I
not,
have comment, sorry that I'm so vocal this meeting. About the property value assessment law. Is
Okay.
there any?
wait a second. So is your comment related to the motion?
No,
Okay, then you hold that comment. We're gonna get committee.
okay.
So is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor to come back with the draft letter? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. That motion carries. Okay, now we're ready for committee comments. James, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to ask if we want to either follow up in a future meeting or if we wanted to make any motions around, I don't know actually if that would be appropriate for a motion, but it seems like with the property assessment conversation that there was some sort of general, not a consensus, but a feeling that the property appraiser could, that there might be some way that they could vet bona fide agricultural operations differently. And so I just wanted to bring it up as a potential action item for us to make, I don't know, make a recommendation if we have any brainstorming on how they could possibly do that better. I think that they're doing a great job, but just in case we have any thoughts that could be constructive
Okay, so
for them.
let me ask you, so we could probably do this without a motion, but it would be like, you would like to do some additional follow-up on any assistance we could maybe supply, or if there is, or if there's any action as a committee we should take based on the property appraiser's presentation. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I suppose we could formally adopt that as to be on the next agenda if you would like to. Otherwise, with consensus of the group, I don't have a problem just putting it on the next agenda. And consensus is fine with me. Is there any objection? Okay, that will be a major topic of discussion.
Chris might be
This
objecting.
is Chris. Yeah, I think I'm objecting because it sounds like they could.
So,
I'm worried. People like me work on the side. I don't have to fill more paperwork from Alachua County. Just find my existence. I think it is.
Okay, Chris is not gonna hear, but he hears us like a twanging guitar. And so we know that we have a single person objected, and unfortunately, even if it was a vote, Chris can't vote since he's online. It's all present today, so that's it. I know there's some people, a lot of people parked on the street, and they'd like to make sure they just don't get a parking ticket. So if we could get out sooner rather than later, it's gonna be better. So is there anything else?
Are there any guests that go with that, or is that just a committee-based discussion?
That's a committee-based discussion. Did I understand that right, James?
Yes. Yeah, I just think that, you know, we're privileged to have all of these presentations, and I just want to make sure that if the committee has thoughts about what potential recommendations to the county or to county entities, that we can make those recommendations and just make sure to.
I just like to remind everyone, and I learned last meeting. So some people occasionally will pick up on the video, because I got a call from a reporter, and Kim did too, and it was about the comment that I made in the meeting because she watched the video on that I made some comment like I had some issues or a problem sometimes with the county charter review committee. And so she was one to interview me, so I never returned the call. But we just need to remember that someone may watch these things as we're even having just internal committee discussions. Of course, people can still join us online. I'd also like to remind everyone that you have to be present to vote. So that's going to be important. Cindy?
Just real quick, I'm serving on the regional broadband task force. We met yesterday the first time, and we will be meeting monthly. And it's not a sunshine committee at all. It's led by Tommy Crosby right now. And we had people from Levy, Gilchrist, Alachua, of course, and Bradford are the 4 counties. And so I will come back and keep y'all informed as we meet.
Excellent. Any other comments for the good of the committee? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Mr. Baines and Gene Chance that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.